The collar brass, the rank, the stripes on your sleeves, that gives you authority, but the trust really has to be earned.
Because you can have a group of really talented people and still not have a strong team. I really feel like trust and confidence go hand in hand.
Honestly, sometimes the culture problem is standing at the front of the room, right?
And instead of asking people to be led by me, I would start telling people what they could expect of my leadership.
How am I showing up as the leader of this team? Trust has to be earned, culture has to be cultivated, and strong teams have to be developed.
You're listening to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast.
Here, law enforcement leaders gain practical tools to lead proactively in a reactive profession so they can communicate clearly, strengthen internal trust, and stay grounded in their call to serve.
I'm Mike McIntosh, a retired sheriff and current division chief with nearly 4 decades in law enforcement leadership.
And I'm Cathy McIntosh, a business and branding strategist and longtime law enforcement wife. I focus on the human side of leadership, communication, identity, and the internal dynamics that impact performance and trust across an organization.
Together, we combine real-world command experience with clear, actionable leadership conversations.
So you can lead with intention, build stronger teams, and elevate your call to service.
Well, welcome back to Elevate Your Call to Service. One of the things that we come back to on this show is that leadership isn't just about what you accomplish as an individual. At some point, leadership has to show up in the team that you're building around you.
And I think that's what keeps it interesting, because you can have a group of really talented people and still not have a strong team.
Exactly. Team building is one of those foundational leadership principles that we talk about. But trust, communication, and culture, they don't just happen because you put good people in the same room.
And that's why we've invited our guest today. Matt Davis talks a lot about trust and the environment that leaders create, and maybe more importantly, the idea that leaders have to lead themselves first.
Matt is a law enforcement lieutenant, organizational development consultant, and the founder of True Bold Leadership. His career has included specialized investigations, crisis negotiation, and working alongside federal agencies. His leadership work focuses on trust, emotional intelligence, team culture, and helping leaders understand how the way they show up impacts people around them. Through his Believe Leadership framework and his work with public safety professionals across the country, Matt challenges leaders to lead themselves first and intentionally build environments where people can thrive.
We have a lot to talk about today.
Matt, welcome to Elevate Your Call to Service.
Michael and Cathy, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm curious, what made trust such a central part of the work that you do for leadership?
What trust became something that I started to look into when I had, I'm one of the, like many law enforcement people that had to raise their hand and say, I needed mental health help. And when I started meeting with a therapist, I felt like I was not doing a good job of trusting myself. So through that journey, I had to start trusting myself again and the decisions I was making outside of work and things that were going on in my life. I needed to just step back and trust myself. One of these things that my therapist showed me and gave me for homework was what they call a control circle. So that's something that shows things that you can control and you can't control inside your life. And that was really life-changing for me. And then I started looking at what it was doing with my life, where I was starting to build trust with myself and with the people that I was trying to rebuild relationships with. And I thought I could translate that into the workplace.
That's really fascinating. I really feel like trust and confidence go hand in hand. And I saw a quote probably 3 weeks ago, and I will never quote it correctly, but it's just really stuck with me. And it was that you lack confidence because you've broken trust with yourself. You've let yourself down, and you need to do what you told yourself you're going to do, and you need to do that first. And I think that just lends itself really naturally to what you're experiencing and what you're trying to say here.
One of the other things that my therapist had me do is sit down and list out the things that I felt like were holding me back in life, because I'm like many others struggled with imposter syndrome, where and I don't know if either of you have heard of that, but it's basically,
Oh yeah.
Or live it.
yes, a lot of people do live it. But being able to understand what imposter syndrome was and how that was affecting me. And one of the big things is on my list was that I'd never completed my college degree. And I felt that was leaving me out of rooms and leaving me out of conversations. No matter, I had progressed through my career up to the level of a lieutenant without having a degree, but I felt like I was missing something, and I just wasn't living up to my full potential. And I had my wife now, when we were dating, told me, the only thing somebody can't take away from you is your education. And having that advice from her really helped me refocus in, and I decided to go back to school. And a lot of that is me, what you see today in True Bold Leadership is coming out of my studies from University of Denver over the last 3 years.
That's great. You use the phrase lead yourself first. Can you kind of walk us through what that actually looks like in practice for the law enforcement leader?
Yes. What that means is you're managing yourself on a daily basis. You are leading yourself. You decide how you're going to show up at work. First of all, you got to decide to show up to work. When I got promoted to lieutenant, I got moved to the jail from my sergeant's position where I was in investigations. And the big thing that I got told is attendance was an issue. And so I had to figure out a way to get people excited about coming to work. And in a detention facility, as you know, Michael, working in a detention facility, that's not a great place to come on a daily basis. So just being able to do that and figure out what is something I can tell them as a leader, what they can expect of me, because I was doing that on a daily basis, what I expect of myself. Recently, I was sharing about how I just ended up doing one little thing at a time, and I started with making my bed. I had no idea that was something that was in a book, a leadership book, but there were very small things that I had when I moved in by myself. After my divorce, I had to do things very regularly. So I got on a schedule. I made my bed every day. I got up and I walked every day. I just took responsibility for myself and making sure that I was just seeing small wins. And when I study organizational development, some of the biggest organizations in the world are just doing very small steps, and those are accumulating over time. So taking small steps with the people that I work with and just trying new things, and not everything worked. And it took me a while to get to where I was, where I am now, using the Believe framework, as well as using the 4 pillars of trust.
That's great.
And Matt, when you're out talking to policing professionals, you're all over the country at this point, what struggles are you consistently hearing from law enforcement leaders right now?
Lack of internal communication. There's a real void of lack of communication. And I think that translates out into the way we communicate with ourselves as well, Cathy. One of the things I recently read a book called Resilience from Eric Gurritans. I'm mispronouncing his name, but he talks about in that book how you need to have your identity drive your actions, and in your actions drive your feelings. And I think what ends up happening is a lot of organizations, a lot of people in policing right now, we're wrapped up in our feelings. We're worried about what the community thinks about us. We're worried about what our command thinks about us when we come to work. And we're not really thinking about how that we're doing it backwards. We have a paradigm that's going backwards. And with command, and you know this, Michael, from being a command member, it's sort of a hit or miss on where the communication is coming from. But if we have a lack of communication, then the staff and our teammates are going to fill that void with whatever they feel is what their story is. And that's what I'm seeing around the country is there's just a lack of communication, a lack of understanding that probably 99% of what we want to do is the same, no matter what position you have within law enforcement. It's just that 1 to 2 to 5% that we do a poor job of communicating that with each other. Because we all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We all want to do a good job, but we all don't communicate the same way. And I have learned that the hard way by having kids in their 20s. I could say something and they totally misunderstand what I'm trying to say. So just getting down to those really I like to call them authentic conversations and letting everybody have a voice.
Well, there's really not much of a faster way to break trust than to have poor or faulty or just inconsistent communication. So yeah, that just plays right into it.
One of the things that we've often said on this podcast is that, the collar brass, the rank, the stripes on your sleeves, that gives you authority, or at least there's this perceived authority, but that trust really has to be earned. And you've developed these 4 pillars of trust. Can you just kind of give us a quick walk through those 4 pillars and really kind of what that looks like or how that shows up inside a team?
Yeah. The 4 pillars, just for everybody, is the first is transparent communication. You need to have transparent communication or authentic communication or however you want to put that. But there needs to be real communication going on, not this, for a long time in supervisors class, we were sort of giving them the bad news sandwich, which is good news, bad news, good news.
Right.
That's not going to work. Consistent recognition, which is not handing out ribbons to everybody, but just being able to say on the scene that, hey, you did a really good job there. And I saw that your strengths really came out when you were handling that victim, that witness, that suspect, that kind of thing. Just that consistent type of recognition. The third is being able to have collaborative decision making. And this is very hard for a lot of people because they don't know how to do collaborative decision making. They think that is the team running the leader, and it's not the same. Is not the same thing. Just bringing a problem to, we've got people. I've got people on my team that come from different cultures, different countries, different educational backgrounds, and when I need to draw on all that to be able to be the best leader that I can be. And then the final one that I think is very, that we're not focusing enough on behind closed doors is protective advocacy for everybody that we work with. So, this, Michael, from being in a lieutenant's meeting, being a sergeant's meeting, being in a FTO meeting, that kind of thing, the ball starts rolling and they start talking about a teammate that might be deficient in a certain area. And then it just becomes a big pile on. Well, if that person is one of my teammates, I should be able to advocate for them and be strong enough to do that. And that's very hard with some leaders because they don't know how to do that because maybe their culture or their organization, they're afraid to be able to speak up for their people. They might think that if they speak up, they're condoning the actions, which is not true. It's just a myriad of things. So those are the 4 pillars of trust that I talk about.
It seems like that last pillar that you talked about, that seems to be maybe the one that a lot of leaders tend to underestimate.
They really do. I think your feedback is very valid in that because when we're behind closed doors, we're always, what we don't do a good job in law enforcement is in leadership, we don't bring out the bright spots. We always want to talk about the dark spots and the things that we missed or the things where somebody could get hurt. And being able to do that and have some type of, appreciative inquiry, we don't really use that very much in law enforcement or in public safety in general, mainly because we do life or death jobs, right? So we definitely want to be able to focus in on, we don't want to do that again because somebody could really get hurt. I understand all that. But when it comes to somebody not filling out a report the right way, somebody maybe not handcuffing the right way, somebody maybe not responding the right way to a victim or a witness. These are not life or death issues. These are issues where we need to be teaching, because as new people come to law enforcement, times have changed. Culture has changed. How we communicate has changed. Interpersonal skills of new people coming to law enforcement are not the same level as when you and I came to law enforcement.
Mm.
And they have a hard time communicating. Like, they're good at this communication because there's not a lot of reading body language in when we're over a screen with one another or we're texting. But now they're out on the street trying to take a statement from somebody or interview a suspect, and they don't understand that I might be stretching like this and looking around, and that I'm looking for a way to escape. They don't understand that because they just they don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
One of the biggest obstacles that's out there a lot of times when leaders are trying to build teams, it's kind of that internal look, and you talked about it early on in this podcast, that really kind of doing that self-assessment. How would you encourage a leader when they are the obstacle to the team that they're trying to build?
In my experience, when I go up to agencies, I'll talk with I might talk with the chief or the sheriff or whoever I might be dealing with, or maybe even the city manager or town manager. And they might say, we have concerns about this person and this person before I even show up. And a lot of times what I find is they sort of know that they're deficient in an area. And a lot of times I can tell how they have their office set up, what they're deficient in. And a lot of times it's just about reading the room, and about a lot of times it's a communication issue. They don't know how to communicate their deficiencies appropriately. So they want to then have a emotional reaction, or try to put people at arm's length, because, hey, if I keep them at arm's length, they won't really know what's going on with me. They might not know that I'm not a very good leader. And the team's performance is showing that you're not a very good leader, or the organization's performance is showing that. So understanding that we're all human beings and just need to have a conversation is where I like to live, in those type of bringing those type of things around, and those type of conversations to the forefront.
That kind of that self assessment, that look internally. Sometimes I think that's difficult, and trying to build into those leaders, because there's in their minds, I think there's that, this is what I want it to look like, but they struggle with making it look the way that they want it to. And quite honestly, sometimes the culture problem is standing at the front of the room, right? It's the culture problem is that leader that's standing in front of the room.
Yeah, I always tell people that I'm a recovering laissez-faire leader, because I thought laissez-faire was like empowering the people that were on my team.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, they want someone to lead and be strong, and have be able to lead the way and show them where leadership actually happens. And being a laissez-faire leader sounds really great, sounds progressive, but for me, I looked around, and when I changed from team to team every year, not a lot of people followed me. And I think that was because my laissez-faire leadership was fine when they were there as a team member, but as they progressed off, they wanted something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't giving them different.
I think it's hard to build into somebody, to mentor somebody, when you're that laissez-faire type of leader. It's great if we're, just kind of doing the same thing over and over. There are a lot of redundancy in the things that we're doing, but when you want to develop somebody into like your position or develop them in a particular area, I think it's very difficult to do that as that type of leader.
Yeah, I would agree. And then as a leader, you don't really, we're all still trying to find where people feel comfortable leading, being led by us. And that's for me, I finally decided that instead of asking people to be led by me, I would start telling people what they could expect of my leadership. And I think that's really what changed the game for me, and has changed the game for a lot of other leaders that I've talked to them about doing that. Especially in the detention facility, we had a pretty close-knit group of people that worked together, and I'm really proud to say that some of those people that have been going on outside of their law enforcement careers to be able to do other things outside. And as a leader, what I decided to do before I even came up with the Believe principle is I sat down with everybody. I had 56 people assigned to me, and I sat down and I asked them all four the same questions. I asked them, what's your why? How do you define trust? What are your goals? And how can I help you reach your goals? And when I did do that, well, the why is a big deal because that gives me an idea of who you are. Because it's not why you become a police officer or a firefighter or any of these things. It's really what makes up you. And they could answer it however they would like. But most people chose to say, this is why I became a cop, or this is why I am still doing this job, that kind of thing. And it was very interesting, the responses that I got. Then when you asked them about trust, everybody had a different definition. I think I've asked that question to over 500 people so far. And every time I get there's it basically boils down to they know it when they see it. But when you actually have them actually sit down and define it, it's a lot harder for them to do it. But they know it when they see it. They know it when they're in the midst of it or when they give it out. But they also know that it's very much easy to lose. Like it's a very fragile thing. And that's what I love about the author Brene Brown. She talks in Dare to Lead about the marble jar example. And I currently use the marble jar on my patrol team this year, where as we do good things, we're filling up the marble jar. We started with a very small jar, like a mason jar, and now we're up to a big mason jar, and we're up to where we're putting, marbles, ping pong balls, all kinds of stuff in there. As we grow as a team, that container gets larger and larger. Hopefully we move into something super large by the end of the year, but it's something that teammates can raise their hands during briefing and say, hey, I want to add to the jar because I saw somebody do this. We can also remove stuff out of the jar. So it's just one of those physical things that we see. The big thing that when I talk to leadership groups about those four questions, the ones that I get the biggest pushback from leadership, like command level and above, is the one about how can I help you reach your goals? A lot of them are like, well, what if this person actually asked me to go to the FBI NA and they're a deputy? That's probably not going to happen, right? Or pay for my college degree or any of these things. Most of the time when I ask that, they look at me and go, Matt, I don't even know how to answer that question because you're the first person that's ever asked me that question, how I can help. Some of them are like, hey, I want to be a detective. I want to work in investigations. I want to go to the SWAT team. I want to be on the SORT team. I want to be on one of those things. I'm glad to do a soft, because a lot of times in a larger organization like I work for, there's a lot of turnover and a lot of people that have only worked detentions don't know people in public safety. So sometimes you have to do an introduction or have them reach out and do a ride along with that team that they're looking to do. So really just being listening. I do more listening than I do talking these days. And I know that seems weird because I'm out speaking to other places, but even in the facilitations I do during my 4-hour program, there's a lot more classwork that's being done with the groups inside that room. And it's really great because they sit around and they look at one another and they ask each other what their why is. And then we construct a control circle, and then they solve a problem. A lot of times after I facilitate, I don't even know what the results are going to be until after the fact. And I was just recently speaking at the FBI Lead a conference, and I had some leaders from a organization, a department that I worked with in Delaware, come up to me and said, "Man, that problem solving that we did in your class, we were able to get. We've just sort of run with it."
Right.
I just want to be there as a facilitator to help create these conversations and these avenues. And there are a lot of leaders, a lot of the leaders are surprised and continue to ask me back because they have their staff continue to ask and want it to be longer than just the 4-hour program, which is great. It means they're getting something out of it, and has little to do with me, has a lot more to do with them interacting with their teammates in a way that they hadn't been able to before in their career.
So you've talked a little bit about your believe framework, your leadership framework. Can you just give us a little snippet of what that is?
Yes. So one of the things I was also watching when I was going to therapy was Ted Lasso. And I don't know if either one of you have watched Ted Lasso, but
Love it.
he puts the believe sign.
Yep.
As you can see, I've got some believe paraphernalia behind me, but he puts the believe sign up there. And for college, I had to pick out a TV show or a movie to do a leadership review on, and I chose Ted Lasso. And during that, I sat down and I sort of broke down what I saw him doing. What I came up with, and the thing that continues to stick, is believe is it is, of course, an acronym. The first thing is B is build psychological safety. We need to build psychological safety in the places that we work. And psychological safety, when you're building psychological safety, it does not mean that we're just letting everything be okay. Most of the research done on psychological safety, especially when it's done in the medical field, will show that there is more staff complaints on other staff because they want to see it done better, and it helps it helps the process get better. So in our psychological safety area, we can have those authentic conversations and say, "Hey, Matt, you didn't do this the way that we're taught or the way policy is set." And that opens up for those conversations. The first E is establish clear expectations. As a leader and as team members, we need to set a clear expectation on what is going on and how we're dealing with one another. One of the simple things that I do on this is I ask people to say this. If we're going to have a hard conversation, maybe in this example, I need to talk to Cathy about her work performance or something that happened on, a couple of days ago. I might come to Cathy and say, "Cathy, are you open for feedback?" That's the signal for her to understand that we're going to have an authentic conversation. There's not going to be any emotion. Like, I've worked through with what I saw, and I'm going to talk to her about what I observed, not what I felt, because those are two different things.
Yeah.
So the expectation is just, this is what I observed and not the way I felt. We want to go through that. The third thing is the first is L, which is listen actively. As a negotiator, I learned active listening. We need to active listen more than we just need to work on that in general. We need to actively listen. And that really helps people with their home life as well. So, if you actively listen to your spouse more or your kids more, it makes them feel seen and heard. And I believe everybody wants to be seen and heard and be part of something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And then for the I, I want to invest in people as a leader. I want to invest in people. I want people seeing that I'm investing in them and really sit down with them. I told my briefing when I rolled this out, I'm like, if somebody wanted to be the LAPD chief, you're in this room. If you want to do that, that's great. If you want to be the greatest race car driver or whatever, like whatever you're doing, I want to invest in you way outside this organization. The second E is energize through trust. having trust with your teammates should energize you to come to work every day, but energize you to take risks that you regularly wouldn't take. And I'm not talking about being dumb risk. I'm talking about taking risk. If we are establishing that psychological safety, we should be able to try new things. And maybe policy can just be a guideline for us to help us through whatever we might be doing there. The V is value growth over perfection. And I think leaders have a hard time with this. We need to really be able to tell the difference, because no one's going to score a 5 on their performance review every year. That's just not going to happen. I'm not going to be able to be perfect. So if I'm seeing a little incremental growth, that small little steps, that should be something that, like we talked about in the 4 pillars of trust, I should be able to recognize in the people, in the teammates that I have, and be able to tell them, I can see you're working. And then E, the final E, is empower others' boldness. My personal mission statement is to help unearth the boldness within. And I want them to encourage other people and themselves to be the bold people that they are and really let their selves come out. Because that's one of the things I found when I started going to therapy, that over the years, not just the job, but how I was not leading myself correctly made my light dim as a person. And when I started opening back up and doing some tough work, I found that my family members, my close friends I've had for many years, they're like, we're back. We see Matt back in our lives, not this person that we've had for the last, 10 or so years.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, great stuff.
Really good. Matt, we're at the section of our episode where we like to introduce a challenge. So I'm going to ask you, if there is a leader listening today and they're thinking, I just don't have the level of trust with my team that I thought I might, what would be the first conversation they should have when they get back to work?
I would really suggest that they take those 4 questions. That's when I do live events and I show those questions on the screen, the phones come out and people start taking photos. And I know leaders that are doing it. So just ask those questions of, what's your why? How do you define trust? What are your goals? And how can I help you? If you start that with your team, you're going to get that. You're going to go down the road of actually making them seen and heard in that moment. And you're going to see results pretty quickly.
I think there's a huge difference too between walking into a room and say, okay, everybody, we're going to start doing better at building trust, and just start behaving in a way that makes people trust you. It makes trust more possible. And I think those 4 questions are a great springboard to that.
Yes.
So it's easy to focus on team exercises, communication strategies, or trying to fix the dynamics between people. But before we get there, we have to be willing to ask the harder question. And that is, how am I showing up as the leader of this team? Trust has to be earned, culture has to be cultivated, and strong teams have to be developed intentionally.
Matt, we are just really honored that you've joined us on the show today. We appreciate your time and all of the wisdom and insights that you've shared today.
I appreciate you guys having me on, and I hope your audience really finds a little bit of nugget that they can help them with their careers going forward.
I have no doubt.
Yeah. And to add to our challenge, don't just ask whether you trust your team. Ask yourself what you're giving your team that gives them a reason to trust you. And until next time, continue to elevate your leadership and your call to service.
If today's episode added value, don't let it end here.
Share it with someone on your command staff or leadership team, because strong leadership isn't built in isolation.
And if you're ready to develop or become proactive leaders inside your organization,
Leaders who communicate clearly and strengthen internal trust,
then visit leleaders.com to learn more about our coaching programs, workshops, and keynotes.
And if the podcast has been helpful, we'd appreciate your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
Until next time, lead with clarity, lead with conviction, and elevate your call to service.